Okay, so here to discuss this and more, we have the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. So the president says he's not considering firing Robert Mueller. His attorney, Ty Cobb, says the president is not going to do this. He calls it a baseless rumor. So do you believe them?
Well, I don't rely on them at all, because we've seen in the past that the president changes his mind on a dime, sometimes multiple times a day. And if next week he decided to start putting pressure on Mueller again and started tweeting at him, or potentially going after Rod Rosenstein so he could appoint someone more pliable to limit Bob Mueller's scope, then he would have some explanation for his change of heart. So no, I don't think we can rely on this at all. I do think Congress ought to take up legislation to protect Bob Mueller and the investigation. And the spectacle that we're seeing in the House, where members of the House Intelligence Committee and House Judiciary Committee are attacking the FBI, they're attacking Bob Mueller, they're calling the FBI corrupt. All of this, I think, is only encouragement to the president that he can act in ways that would be destructive of our system of justice, and he'll have only too many quiescent partners in the House.
But maybe the plan is more subtle than what you think. I mean, maybe it's not getting rid of Rod Rosenstein. Maybe it's not following Bob Mueller. Maybe it's what you're talking about there, that just, chip away at Bob Mueller's reputation by saying things about him so that he stays in place, but when his findings come out, they're tainted somehow.
That's unquestionably part of the strategy of some of the House Republicans and the White House and Steve Bannon and their allies. And sadly, it is bearing some fruit. The independence of the Justice Department is being eroded. And we saw that in the release of these private text messages by the Department of Justice, not to Congress, but they went to the press directly to give internal messages of FBI agents during a pending Inspector General investigation. That never happens. So why did it happen? I think it's the Deputy Attorney General is feeling the pressure. And this is, I think, deeply dangerous to the independence of Bob Mueller's investigation. He needs to be allowed to do his work, not be interfered with, not have the Department of Justice violate policies in ways that threaten his investigation. And he needs to make sure that the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, needs to make sure that Bob Mueller has the scope to investigate with his charter to protect the American people.
You wrote that you wrote this week in an op-ed that you believe that the president is pressing House Republicans to stop their investigation. What's your evidence?
Well, he says it almost every day. We see that he intervened with the Senate Republicans, urging them to curtail their investigation. His proxies like Steve Bannon are out on TV saying we need to shut these investigations down. They're not hiding their hand. They're being quite deliberate about it, and unfortunately it's having its desired effect. We have scheduled no witnesses. The majority won't schedule any witnesses after January 1st, and there are dozens more that we need to bring in. They're scheduling interviews out of state while we're here voting on the tax bill, taking a lot of otherwise inexplicable steps unless it looks like they are bending to the will of the White House and the president's allies.
Yesterday, the Deputy FBI Director, Andrew McCabe, met for 8 hours behind closed doors with your committee. Can you share with us what you learned?
I can't go into any of the testimony before our committee. I can say more generally about Mr. McCabe that I think he has been a dedicated public servant to the country for a great many years. The bureau that he represents, I've worked with for almost 30 years and have the finest agents, I think, of any law enforcement agency. And the attacks on his character and on the character of the hardworking people at the bureau, I think is reprehensible. People calling for him to resign with no accusation, no proof of any wrongdoing on his part. It's grossly irresponsible. And this is going to do lasting damage. There's already enough erosion of public confidence in the institutions of our government, but to now discredit the FBI and the Department of Justice the way they're doing is just, I think, completely irresponsible.
Yeah, as you know, his critics say that because his wife ran for office as a Democrat and took money from Terry McAuliffe, that sort of disqualifies him. Do you think that, as Senator Chuck Grassley has suggested, that he will be fired?
No, I don't think he'll be fired. And what's more, people who work for the federal government are not precluded from having their spouses either have a political career or express political views. And some of the suggestions, for example, from, chairmen of committees in the House and Senate, that Bob Mueller should fire people on his team that contributed to a Democratic candidate. You can't ask people about their contributions. You can't discriminate against people that have participated in the political process and say, you're not going to be hired or you're going to be fired because you engaged in lawful political activity. And it shocks me to hear people in responsible positions of power making these arguments. And they're all the more shocking when you consider that each of the pivotal people doing this investigation, in terms of Bob Mueller and Christopher Wray and our Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, our Attorney General, these are Republicans. And yet the GOP, at least in the House, is not satisfied with Republicans conducting an independent investigation of Republican administration. It's just preposterous.
Congressman Adam Schiff.